I'm really excited about today's video because we're going to be looking at the last 20 years of real estate and how it applies to today. And then also, this is going to be a little bit longer video, but hang in there with us because we're going to be making bold predictions for 2024, and especially as we head into 2025, that might surprise you. If you don't know me, my name's Jeremy Williams with the Bannack Real Estate Group, and we've been in business for over 20 years. And since the day I got in business, I realized the importance of understanding the market because that helps you recognize the opportunities and create a competitive advantage for our clients. In that time period, we've done over 1,000 transactions in just about every type of market you can do. And that experience has positioned us perfectly to deal with things that come up like COVID markets or low inventory markets or high inventory markets, and creating those competitive advantages. Today, we're going to be talking about historical sales, absorption rate, which is basically supply and demand. What are the pendings doing? And most importantly, what you're all waiting for, what can we expect 2024? So let's get into it. This first graph, it's the last 20 years of single family home sales per year. So if you look at the graph, a couple things stick out. The highest number of sales we've had in the last 20 years was actually in 2006. And it wasn't until 14 years later in 2020 that we got close to that number again. Now, of course, in the middle of that, from 2010 to 2015, in terms of real estate in Missoula, was considered a recessionary market. And you can see that hit the bottom in 2011 with just about 800 homes that sold. So that was an all-time low. This year was actually the third lowest number that we've seen in 20 years with 888 houses. And we've actually been on a decline since 2020. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We're going to be talking about this further. But it's important to recognize that the low sales numbers last year are very different for the reasons that we saw them in 2011. In 2011, there's 1,400 homes for sale at any given time, and there was barely any buyers. Today, there's only like 217 homes for sale, and there's a lot of buyers still trying to get into the market. There's a couple other factors to this, but for the most part, we're in an inventory constrained market. And we're going to be looking at that as does our market continue to shrink, or are we going to rebound, bounce off that bottom line and start working our way up and as we go. Another thing to think about over the last 20 years, our population has grown over 20,000 people. So you'd expect those sales to exponentially grow. Why is 2006 still the highest number of sales? And that is also something that we're going to be exploring in future slides. This next graph, it's basically the last 17 years, and it shows per month how many active homes were on the market compared to how many sold for the last 17 years. So the light blue is the number of active, the dark blue is the number of solds. If you look at the solds at the bottom, there's a lot of consistency in what happens in our seasonal market, where it's like, the high point of the market is spring and the summer, the low part is winter for the number of sales. But it's important to realize there's opportunities in both markets. So that's something that we're always paying attention to. The only time this changed a little bit is around 2020, 2021, where we had a little bit more active winters than we've seen. But the trend for the last 2 years is getting back into that seasonal market. And nice thing about seasonal market is a little bit more predictable, and there are absolutely opportunities in each market depending on what your goals are. So a couple things to think about is at one point we were up to 1,200 homes for sale at any given time. Right now we're down to 217 homes. Now, if you look at the graph starting at September 2015 on to today, we've seen a decline of houses for 8 years now, essentially. And the important thing to know is we saw our market not fulfilling the demand of housing. We were in a housing shortage 4 years before COVID. The problem is when COVID hit, it was like pouring gas on a fire, and the whole situation just exploded. So that's going to play into what we could expect for the next 2 to 3 years as we try to get more inventory on the market, settle the market down, because this really plays into affordability. When we drive around Missoula and we're like, why are prices so high? Well, this is a big part of it, is our need for more housing to help control the market. This graph shows the median price trends for the last 17 years. So if you look at 2007 to 2019, The green line shows the median sold price. The blue line shows the median list price. So listed versus what properties actually sold for. And if you look at that first 12, 13 years, you can see that that green line, really didn't appreciate much. It really didn't go up much more than $100,000 in that time period. What's interesting, if we look at 2019, 2020, we saw a $300,000 rate just in those 3, 4 years. Kind of have like the hockey stick where it's really slow and then it goes up. And there's a lot of reasons why this is, but it's almost like the lack of appreciation that we saw in the previous 12, 13 years, all compounded in a 2, 3 year time period when we had the perfect storm to make that happen. So that is something we're watching. There is a couple things that I do want to talk about here is when we look at things like an overall median sold price, we want to be careful of how we're analyzing the data, because on the macro level, it might show one thing, but when we really dive into it, it might show another. And I'll give you an example of this. Now, we could all agree that home prices have increased. Certainly, homes are dramatically different than, more expensive than they were a couple years ago. But there is some outliers too that will change the data a little bit. And I'll give you an example is, some months maybe only 60 houses sell. And in the 60 houses that sell, if that particular month, $2, $3, $4 million houses sell, that's going to pull that median price up considerably because it's a small data set. If the next month the same 60 houses sell, but those $1 million houses weren't there, that's going to pull it down. So we do see a lot of volatility because of the small data sets. The biggest thing that's changed in our market is, let's just say previous to January 19th, if you had said that there's $1, $2, $3, $4 million houses that sold, I would have been surprised. That would have been a great year for $1 million plus homes. In fact, in 2000, I think it was like 2015, 2016, I remember selling a university house, and I was jokingly going to run an ad that I sold 100% of the $1 million houses that year because it was the only one in that price category. Now, since January 19th, certainly things have changed considerably. In 2023 alone, over 72 houses sold for over $1 million. Now, this is a different price category than we're used to seeing, but it's certainly pulling up our average median sold price. But it's important to know that there still are a decent amount of houses in the other price ranges. So you want to be careful of if that's artificially increasing it for what's going on in the market. But it is certainly an emerging market over the last couple of years that we have to pay attention to. And if you've been watching my videos, I spend a lot of time on absorption rate. And absorption rate basically is how we analyze supply and demand. How many buyers are in the market compared to how many sellers? And is it a healthy market? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? This graph right here shows absorption rate. And how I track absorption rate is by months of inventory. So if there's 100 homes on the market and 10 sell every month, it's going to take 10 months to get rid of all the inventory. The gray line across the graph is a 6-month line. According to the National Association of Real Estate Agents, that 6 months is a normal market. So what's a normal market? Well, if you're selling a home, you could get a good price. And if you're buying a home, you have a couple selections and you feel good about the price you're paying for your house. That's considered a normal market. It's easy to get from one place to another. If you're over the gray line, it's going to be a buyer's market. And if you're under the gray line, it's going to be a seller's market. And of course, the further you are away from each of those, from that line, the more extreme the market is. So of course, in September 2010, we went from a seller's market into an extreme buyer's market pretty quick too, just over a matter of a couple months. And there was a lot of reasons why that happened so fast. The things were going on with the economy and lending practices. But then you look at September 2015, and we got out of that buyer's market into a seller's market pretty quick. And this graph also shows what we were talking about before, where it's like starting at September 2015, we started losing inventory. We started creating a problem well before COVID. So give you an example of the differences. Let's just pick like in 2012, when you have 15 months of inventory consistently. I remember going out and we'd look at 75, 80. I had somebody look at 100 homes before they made a selection. It seemed like every other home on the market was available and willing to work with a buyer. Today, especially if you're looking at a certain area of town and a certain price range. It might be more like, here's 1, 2, 3 options. Which one do you want to pick? So it's really constraining our market in a lot of different ways. A couple things to think about. Buyers that purchased homes during the recession got great prices for their houses. So they're into them with a lot of equity. And what happened is, starting in September 2015, when we transitioned into a seller's market, their houses started appreciating. And in previous markets, we might see buyers or homeowners turn over, say, every 5 to 7 years. Well, what happened is those homeowners decided to hold their homes longer for more like 10, 15, even 20 years. Now, fast forward a little bit into the COVID market, the same thing happened. It compounded on each other, where the sellers that got in at really low interest rates before the rates went up are now holding their houses for longer. So you have two different groups that are holding their houses for a longer time period that would normally be turning over and add more inventory to the market. We're also going to be talking about how our inability in Missoula to be able to get more inventory to the market in the form of development and new construction, which is going to be an important component for the next 10 years. Again, absorption rate, this top graph shows what absorption rate looked like for 2023. You can see it stayed between about 1.4 and 3 months majority of the year. And the bottom graph is what I call list the sales price. It's evidence of more of a seasonal market that we've been seeing, but it's also what I look at list the sales price is to get an indication, are prices going up? Are they going down? It can sometimes help us make smarter buying and selling decisions when we understand what's going on in the market. So as you look at it, if you look through January through April and September, or basically October through December, the average seller's been getting 97 to 98% list the sales price. That's actually considered normal. In most normal markets, 97, 98% is what you'd expect. Now, in April through September, in average, they were getting 100% list the sales price, which is an indication of still a strong market. And the gray lines indicate when our inventory goes down under, say, 2.5 months, prices go up. When it goes over 2.5 months, prices have just, I don't want to say softened because it's still a very strong market, but the buyers had a little bit more negotiating power than they did during those summer months. Next, this is the total inventory of homes per month for the last 8 years. So starting 2015 to 2023. So you can see in 2015, 2016, it wasn't uncommon to have, say, 600, 700 homes on the market, and it was still a seller's market at that time. Now, if you look at today, again, 217 homes on the market, low inventory. In fact, the lowest we saw was, I think, January, February 2022. I got down to like 68 houses for sale in all of Missoula. And you got to consider there's like 80,000 people that live in the city, 100,000 plus in the greater Missoula area. When you're talking about 60, 100, 200 homes in all price ranges, and especially if you consider that, say, 40 of those homes are over $1 million, that's not a lot of inventory to be looking for. So again, the inventory problem started 4 years before COVID, and post-recession post-COVID made it even worse. So here's something, like a lot of people have been asking where the inventory is going. So we talked about the buyers that bought during the recession, holding on their homes for a long time. We talked about the buyers who bought during COVID at a really low interest rate are holding on to their homes for a lot longer. So these are the homes that would normally come in the market. In fact, we see buyers right now with low interest rates on their houses. They're still buying houses, but they're keeping their previous house. That was a house that would normally come on the market for somebody to purchase. They're keeping that and use it as a rental because the payments are so low on it. The other challenge we have is local builders have not been builders and developers haven't been able to keep up with the demand, and there's a lot of reasons for that. First, I mean, we're constrained by mountains in our valley. We're not like a Bozeman, Billings, or Kalispell where there's huge valleys to build in, and we could just build forever to keep up with the demand. We're constrained, so we have a limited amount of land is one that's available at any given time. Two, we have a very slow process for local government getting the new developments to the marketplace and even getting approval for building permits. And it's really backlogged the market to a critical level, in my opinion. I'll give you an example of that. Like for 2023, the average time it took for a builder to get approved for a building permit was 151 days. Now we'll give the city credit for the last couple months of the year. It got down to about 90 days to get just approval to build a house. But let's put that in perspective. Right now, it's taken about 8, 9, 10 months to build a house. So a builder that wants to build a house to help bring to the market today. He decides today he's going to take 3 months to get approval for that. And then really that house isn't going to be even on the market this year. It's going to come on the market next year. So from here on out, for the most part, any builders that are trying to keep up with the demand, that inventory is not even going to show up until this time next year. On top of that, lending practices have changed. So if you went to a lender and say, if you're a builder and you went to a lender, say in 2000 or 2020, then a lot of times those lenders would be like, hey, here's 4, 5, 6 spec homes that you can build, bring to the market to help keep up with demand. Well, now because the banks are pulling back, they might be like, well, here's one house you can build at a time. So we're actually having a housing crunch that's just making this problem exponentially worse. So what happens in the market? Well, we've all seen this. How do we fulfill housing demands, and especially afford to build houses? The easiest way for a landowner to do that is to, if their property is zoned for apartments, and then they can only get one, building permit and build a lot of different units all at once in the same time period. So, obviously, as you're driving around, we're seeing apartment complexes popping up everywhere to fulfill that housing need in general. The problem with it is it's a short-term solution where we're getting people into housing. We're able to somewhat keep up with the rental market for the most part, although the low supply of rentals is also creating high rental prices. We're not able, I don't see a way that Missoula has been able to keep up with the demand of actually home ownership that's going to help people out in the future. And there's a big gap being created between renters and homeowners right now in terms of equity. So that's what we're going to have to solve for the next couple of years, is how do we get that inventory to market? Because of the low inventory, this is what's happened to medium home sold prices since 2019. You can see last year we had a 6% appreciation in the median sold price. So we're still seeing prices go up, but it's at a much more manageable level than we saw previous years. So from 2019 to 2023, it went up almost $300,000. There was a year we had 25% appreciation, one year we had 29% appreciation, then 16% appreciation. That is uncontrollable and it's not sustainable. So 6% is normal. Actually, if you look at a 30-year time period across all of America, 4% is the average median sales pricing or appreciation year over year. And so you'll have some years that are big, some years are even a little bit lower, but 4% is average. So 6% is still a little bit above average. I expect, if nothing, a major change is that we're going to see 4 to 6% appreciation. The market is pulling back. It has to make a readjustment because with the interest rates and affordability in Missoula, something's got to give. So we're going to see more probably consistent years of small growth, kind of like we saw from 2000, that 12 years between 2007 and 2019. And I do expect that to continue. One thing to keep in mind too is we need all kinds of housing. I know there's a big push on affordable housing. I'm a huge supporter of whatever affordable housing means. I think that's different for everybody. But in fact, we're actually developing properties and trying to come up with housing plans and solutions to create lower priced inventory that we could bring to the marketplace. However, it is also important to understand that all housing helps Missoula. And the reason is there's kind of like this chain reaction that happens when a house comes on the market. So for instance, if a $800,000 house comes on the market, most likely that's bought by someone that currently owns a $600,000 house and they move up. Now that $600,000 house comes on the market, and that's probably bought by someone that owns a $500,000 house and they move up, and the $500,000, and so forth. So just bringing in all kinds of housing does help create more affordable housing in a lot of different ways too. So this next graph is how many under contracts have been on the market at any given time for the last 2 years. So you can see there's, again, that seasonal effect where January is the lower month. It goes up to June, July are the higher months, and then come down into December. It helps us predict, if you ask, when's the absolutely best time to put your house in the market? When are these houses going under contract? We can pay attention to these models and start creating the best case scenario, because if you're doing what the masses are doing, you're probably too late. The opportunity is to understand the data, and usually it's before everybody else starts making a decision. One thing to look at on this graph, if you look at December 2022 compared to December 2023, we see a 44% increase in the number of under contracts month over month. And so when we have only 888 houses that sell last year, it's looking like, because of the number of under contracts we have, that we're going to hit that bottom of last year for sales and start working our way up. We're already 44% higher in potential sales this year, houses that are under contract, than the same time last year. So that's a big jump that I expect that we're going to get back to a lot more year over year sales than we saw last year. And then real quick, this last graph is the same. The light blue is the total number of under contracts in a given month, and the dark blue is the number of under contracts, the new under contracts for that particular month. So you see that seasonal model in there. One thing that I just want to look at here is there's a large gap between the total number of under contracts and how many come under contracts per month. And if we had the sold data in here, you'd see that there's a gap between, there's a lot more under contract than actually selling each month. And what that tells us is a lot of people are looking at new construction to satisfy their housing needs. And the reason we know that is because new construction house, if you put it under contract, it could show as a total under contract for months, maybe even up to a year. Whereas if you're buying resales, those houses are on and off the market. They're under contract and sold usually between 30 and 45 days. So if that gap was lower, we know that people are buying resales. Because the gap's so high, we know that, and we're holding over a lot of under contracts month over month compared to what actually sells, we know that they're getting into new construction. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. So here's what you've been waiting for. What can we expect for 2024 forecast? Well, in the next 3 months should actually be one of the best times this year to purchase a house. And why we're seeing this, and I've been predicting this for a couple months now, is, and it's kind of like that chart with the list of sales price. Right now, sellers have been more negotiable than we've seen in previous years. And if you're looking to sell a house in the wintertime, usually you're a little bit more motivated. It's not that everybody's just going to dump their house or going to be a good deal, but there is a better chance to get a little bit more negotiating room now than most likely what you'll see in the spring and the summer. I do expect the next 6 months to be more of a normal market, barring no changes, sudden changes with interest rates or economy, or there's a lot of other factors in election year that comes into play. But barring no major changes, I do expect it to be not a bad market, but not necessarily a really exciting market, just a boring, normal market throughout the first 6 months of the year. Now, the second half of the year is when things might get a little bit more exciting. When it comes to the economic data that's coming up, some of the sources that we're following, we have potential of seeing rates down in the low sixes or maybe even the fives by the second half of the year. And that will be the driving force. If rates don't stay the same, I expect us to end up better than last year. So it's going to be a growing year regardless, in my opinion. But if rates start going down, we're going to see some big changes. And let me explain why that is. In the last 20 years, what I've realized is we don't always buy homes based on finances. It has more to do with needs. What's our need at the time? And the reality is that life's changed in a short amount of time, and our needs change. So people getting married, they're getting divorced, they're having kids, the kids are moving out of the house, job relocations, whatever it is, there's a lot of reasons why the house we're in right now doesn't work for us anymore. And what happens is, I believe people have been holding on to their homes that don't work for their needs. And so when you bought a house at a 3% interest rate and now rates are 8%, it's a big jump to satisfy your need. It's an expensive jump to satisfy your need to sell that house at 3% and then get into an 8% loan. the gap doesn't necessarily make sense for a lot of people. However, when rates start going down to, say, low sixes and fives, that gap is not necessarily as big. And I believe that there's a lot of people that are in their house right now that aren't happy with their house, and they've just been holding on. I mean, think about this: like anybody that bought their house between 2019 to 2022, they probably didn't even like their house the day that they moved into it. They just had to get anything. Anybody that would accept their offer to getting a low interest rate and get the beginning of that appreciation, that massive appreciation that we saw. So you have all these people that have been holding on their house because of low interest rates, or they bought it during the recession and they just got a great price. And now you have all these people that, their lifestyles are changing and they need to change as well. And people that bought houses they don't even like. And as that gap gets lower, I think they're going to take advantage of it. So what that means, if this happens, we could see like a mini run of housing again, kind of like a COVID type environment. And I believe that would start the end of next year into 2025, where there's a really good chance that the market's going to open up. So look for interest rates really be driving force between that. As that gap shrinks, it could get pretty exciting quick here. Now, of course, as a gap, when I say exciting, we still have the trouble of low supply of houses. That potentially helps solve some of the problems that we're in. So over the next year, it's going to be more important than ever to know your numbers. If we follow the masses, it's often going to get you in trouble. There's opportunities other places. And when we really dial this in, this is a broad overview, but we can look at a micro level and really find a solution that works for you. When you know what the market is doing, the moment you can find opportunity no matter what's happening. And if you're thinking about buying, selling, or investing in real estate this year, please reach out. It's never too early to start planning. I'm going to be putting out monthly videos, so please subscribe to our channel, and that way you can stay ahead of the market. If you have any questions, any ideas, any comments, please reach out. You can always reach me at my office, and certainly also on my cell phone. The number is 406-531-1519, and we look forward to talking to you soon.